I used to think the scariest part of working the night shift at a gas station was staying awake. That was before the knocking started. Before I realized I wasn't alone out here, miles from the nearest town, with only the buzz of the neon lights and the sound of my own breathing for company. The gas station sat on a lonely stretch of highway, surrounded by nothing but dark fields and forest. Most drivers passed through on their way to somewhere else. By midnight, the place felt abandoned, like a forgotten outpost. It was my first week working nights, and honestly, I had taken the job because I needed the money, not because I wanted the quiet. But there was something strangely peaceful about it, until tonight. It started just after 1 a.m. I was behind the counter, scrolling aimlessly on my phone when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. It sounded faint, almost polite, like someone knocking on a door. But the thing was, all the doors were locked, and no car had pulled up. I looked at the monitors. Our security system showed grainy black and white, images of the pumps and the lot empty, nothing moved. I told myself it was just the building settling, but then it came again, louder. Tap, tap, tap. This time I froze. It wasn't random, it was 3 knocks, evenly spaced, as if someone wanted me to open the door. I grabbed the flashlight from under the counter and slowly stepped around to the front windows. Nothing. The lot was still empty, bathed in harsh white light. The highway beyond was a black ribbon disappearing into the woods. I swallowed hard and locked the deadbolt, though it was already locked before going back behind the counter. 15 minutes passed. I had just started to relax when the power flickered. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed, stuttered, and went dark for half a second. The humming refrigerators along the wall stopped. Even the air felt still, and in that brief silence I heard something that made my stomach drop. Breathing. It was coming from just outside the glass. I didn't want to look, but something made me peek toward the windows. There was a face, just for a second, a pale, expressionless face pressed against the glass. And then, before I could even gasp, the lights blinked back on, and the face was gone. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. My first thought was to call someone, my boss, the police, anyone, but when I reached for the phone, the line was dead. No dial tone. I was completely alone. The next hour passed in a blur. I paced the small store, checking every aisle, every corner, every locked door. At 2:30 a.m., a car finally pulled in, a beat-up pickup truck. Relief washed over me. The man who got out looked rough, maybe late 50s, with oil-stained hands and a face like weathered leather. He walked inside, grabbed a coffee, and set it on the counter without a word. "You all right?" he asked after a moment. I nodded. "Yeah, just quiet night." He gave me a look I couldn't quite read, then leaned closer. "Quiet's not always good out here." He left, and that's when I saw it. Just beyond the pumps, near the edge of the lot, stood a figure. Too tall, too thin, its head tilted at an odd angle. I blinked, and it was gone. By now my hands were shaking. I wanted to run, but I couldn't leave. At exactly 3 a.m., the knocking came back. Only this time it wasn't on the windows. It was from the back room. The back room had no windows. No way in except through the door that was locked from my side. I reached the back door and pressed my ear against it. Silence, and then a whisper. "Leave." The door handle rattled. I ran, locked myself in the tiny bathroom. 10 minutes passed in silence. When I finally stepped out, the store was empty. Everything normal. But on the counter where I had been sitting earlier, a single wet handprint. It wasn't mine. I didn't sleep after that first night, even when the sun finally came up. And I drove home along the empty highway, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The image of that wet handprint on the counter burned into my mind, but I came back. Of course I did. Rent doesn't pay itself. The second night felt different from the start. The air outside was warmer, but inside the station, the hum of the lights seemed louder than usual, almost angry. I tried to distract myself by restocking shelves and wiping down counters, anything to avoid standing still and listening. Just after 12:30, the first car of the night rolled in. A young woman in her 20s, clearly exhausted, wearing a business suit with her jacket tossed in the passenger seat. She grabbed an energy drink and a bag of chips. "You work out here alone?" she asked casually, glancing around the empty store. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound normal. She frowned. "That's brave." "Why?" I asked, and immediately regretted it. "Place has a reputation," she said with a shrug. "You know, urban legends, people disappearing, weird stuff happening." There's a thread about it online. They call it the Highway Hollow. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. You should be careful, she added. Sometimes it's not just legends. Before I could ask what she meant, she paid and left. Her car disappeared into the night, and I was alone again. By 1 a.m., the knocking started. But this time, it didn't come from the back room. It came from everywhere. 3 knocks on the front windows, 3 knocks on the cooler doors, 3 knocks from somewhere under the floor. I spun around, my flashlight beam catching glimpses of movement, shadows that didn't belong, vanishing when I looked directly at them. Then the lights flickered, and for one heart-stopping second, the entire store went black. When they came back on, I wasn't alone. A man was standing in the middle of the aisle. He was soaked from head to toe, as if he'd just stepped out of a river, his clothes clinging to his body. His face was pale, almost gray, and his eyes looked wrong, like they were too far back in his skull. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, water dripping onto the floor. "Sir?" I tried again. Slowly, he raised one arm and pointed toward the back room. "No," I said before I could stop myself. "I'm not going back there." The man's mouth twitched like he was trying to smile, and then he was gone. Not walked away, not turned and left, just gone like a light switched off. The floor where he'd been standing was still wet. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the keys, unlocked the front door, and stepped outside, desperate for air. The night was heavy, the forest on either side of the highway looming like black walls. And then I saw them. Figures, dozens of them, standing just beyond the circle of light cast by the gas station. Lamps, motionless, silent, every single one of them soaking wet. My breath came fast and shallow. I backed toward the station, my eyes locked on the figures. They didn't move, didn't step forward, but I felt them watching me. Inside again, I locked the doors, turned every light on. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys. At exactly 3 a.m., the power went out. Total darkness. I could hear them now. Footsteps all around the building, knocking from every wall, every surface. Louder and louder until it felt like the whole station was vibrating. And then from the back room, a single sound cut through it all. The door unlocking. I couldn't see, but I heard it. The unmistakable click of the bolt sliding back. Something was coming through. I bolted for the flashlight, my beam cutting through the dark, landing on the back hallway just as the door slowly creaked open. Water poured out. Not a leak, not a spill. Actual water flooding across the floor, icy cold, soaking my shoes. And then something stepped through the door. It was the man from before, but his face was wrong now. Stretched, unnatural, his mouth too wide. Behind him, more shapes moved in the darkness. Dozens of them, all crowding toward the doorway. I stumbled backward, slipping in the water, dropping the flashlight. The last thing I saw before it hit the ground and went out was the man grinning at me. In the pitch black, the whisper came again. "Leave!" Only this time it wasn't a warning. It was a command. The water was up to my ankles now, freezing cold, soaking into my jeans as I scrambled backward. I could barely breathe. The back room door stood wide open. The darkness beyond it almost alive, writhing with shadowy shapes that didn't quite look human. I grabbed the flashlight and pointed it toward the doorway again. They were all standing there. The soaked man was in front, grinning that too wide grin. But now I could see the others clearly. Men, women, even a child, their clothes decades out of date. Their skin pale and bloated like they'd been underwater far too long. They didn't move. They just stood and stared, their eyes reflecting the beam of my light. And then one by one they stepped into the station. The water surged forward as they moved, filling the aisles, soaking the snacks, knocking over bottles. I backed up against the counter, nowhere left to go. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice breaking. The man tilted his head, his wet hair dripping, and whispered again. "Leave." "I can't," I shouted. "I need this job." "I can't just walk away." The man's grin widened, impossibly wide now, stretching ear to ear. "Then you stay." And suddenly they all moved at once. The lights overhead flickered violently as the figures rushed toward me. I grabbed the bat we kept under the counter, swinging wildly, but my arms passed right through them like they were made of mist. The air grew so cold it hurt to breathe. My vision blurred, and then I wasn't in the station anymore. I was standing on the edge of a black lake under a moonless sky. The water was still like glass, reflecting nothing. All around me were the same figures standing in a circle, their wet clothes clinging to their bodies. The man stepped forward, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "This place takes what it's owed," he said, his voice echoing strangely. "Every soul that works here becomes part of it. Part of us." I shook my head violently. "No, this isn't real." But it felt real. The freezing mud beneath my feet, the stench of stagnant water, the sound of something huge moving just beneath the surface of the lake. "You heard the knocks," the man said. "You saw the signs. You stayed. Now you belong." I turned to run, but the figures closed in, hands grabbing at me, pulling me toward the lake. I fought, screamed, but my feet slid into the icy water. And then from the depths, something rose. At first I thought it was just a shape, but as it broke the surface, I saw its face in a reflection of my own. Twisted and pale, grinning that same awful grin. I felt myself dragged forward under the surface, the freezing black water filling my lungs. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the gas station, but everything was wrong. The shelves were empty. The lights flickered dimly, buzzing like dying flies. The door was gone, not locked, not closed, just gone. There was no way out. And in the front window, I saw my reflection. Only it wasn't me. It was the soaked man, staring back at me, smiling. Somewhere outside, a car pulled in. Headlights swept across the lot. A young guy stepped out, yawning, walking toward the door. I opened my mouth to scream, to warn him, but no sound came out. Instead, I heard the knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks echoing through the empty station. And the boy froze, looking toward the sound. The end.